G'day and welcome back to Australia's best classic mini YouTube channel. On this episode we have a subscriber's car in which we're going to be rectifying why the brakes don't work. So as you heard, this is yet another subscriber's car. I had someone reach out and ask, hey, would you mind looking at my car for me and giving me your opinion on why my brakes don't work? So this is the clip that the customer sent me and wanted me to have a look at. So as you just saw then, it is making some sort of honking sound whenever you put your foot on the brake. So we need to try and work out what it is and what's actually happening to the vehicle. So before we get started, let's talk about how to diagnose an issue. So anyone that has been watching the channel from day one knows a little bit about me and that I've spent some time in dealerships. 10 of those years I've worked for both Volkswagen and Audi combined, so I do have some experience in European cars. Now this is an Australian built Leyland Mini Clubman S, which we'll get to in just a minute. I do have quite in-depth knowledge of how the system works with diagnosis and the ways to proceed. So we're going to get into that in just 1 second. We're going to jump back onto this car. This is an Australian built Leyland Mini Clubman S. It is a 1974. It has a 1275 engine with twin SU carburetors. I haven't inspected it just yet, but I think they're either going to be 1¼ inch or they're going to be 1.5. So regardless, I've driven this thing around the block and it just pulls like a 13-year-old school kid. So it's pretty mint. The paint's been redone. It does have the pinstripes down the sides. The interior has recently been redone as well. We'll have a look at that in a second. It smells amazing in there. Like it is literally been reupholstered and then he's bought the car. So it does have a couple little blemishes down around here. We do need to replace a couple of the wiper motor rubbers, which we might do depending if the customer wants us to do them or not. Everything about this car is really nice. It's got really nice wheels on it. Doesn't leak oil. The color is deep. It's just an amazing car. The only bad thing I'll say about it is, which you've seen on previous episodes as well, the smell in my shed of the fuel vapor. So as we've discussed previously, we need to figure out where that fuel vapor smell is coming from. Chances are it's the fuel breather pipe at the back. So in the fuel tank, you do have the little breather pipe that does need to be run to either a charcoal canister if it's a modern car or just into the manifold. That way all the fuel vapor that comes out doesn't just gas out your shed and then you go outside to light up a durry or you're welding or something and bang, before you know it, the whole car is in flames and you just burnt the house to the ground. So it is a really, really big concern to make sure that not only for my own welfare, but the customer's welfare, that if he is storing it in a facility like this, in a small garage or anywhere that is not open to ventilation, it is going to cause some serious health hazards and an explosion or possible explosion, I guess. So let's get back on track and talk about the Mini and how we're going to diagnose it. So working with both Volkswagen and Audi, they taught me the ways in which you need to diagnose a vehicle. So we're going to be using the complaint or concern, the cause, and the rectification. So CCR. So whenever we were writing a story, and I don't mean just a Bible story, I'm not meaning a paragraph on anything, or writing a novel, but whenever we wrote something to do with a vehicle and how we diagnose it, we had to go through and explain everything of how we came to that predicament. You can't just say, oh well, car drove in, no brakes, found car was missing brakes, fitted brakes, see you later. It wasn't like that. You really had to go in depth, and the reason for that is when we submitted warranty claims, they had to be able to justify that. So every single thing that we removed and touched and did, they paid a time unit. So if you just wrote, found brakes, need replacing, replaced pads, see you later, you're only going to get paid probably about 0.2, maybe 0.5 of an hour. So you really had to get in depth with it. So where I'm going with this is we need to work it out. So the condition that this is currently doing is when the vehicle is running, and only running as far as I'm aware, you put your foot on the brake, it makes that honking sound, and the brake pedal is a bit spongy, but also it goes quite hard quite quickly, and it doesn't really perform. So then we need to work out the cause. Now, what is causing that? Is it something to do with the brake pedal? Is it something to do with the wheel cylinders? Is it something to do with the grip of the tyres, is the pedal not secured properly, whatever it is. And then the rectification. So what we need to do to rectify it, how do we fix it? What do we do to fix the vehicle? So let's jump in and have a look at the different things that we can assess and teach you guys on how to diagnose a vehicle. All right, so the first thing you need to assess is, does this only happen when the car is running, or does it happen when the ignition is switched off and we apply the brake pedal? So we're in the car now. Let's just have a bit of a look and see what it's going to do. Okay, so the brake pedal feels quite firm. There's nothing really wrong here. It just feels like a normal brake pedal. So that helps to narrow it down. So we now know that it'll only happen when the engine is running. And also we need to look at what systems are involved with this. So we know that the engine has to be running. So one, it's related to engine, and two, how is it causing the problem? Well, we're putting a foot on the brake. So we now know that the engine and the brake systems are what we need to look at. So let's jack the vehicle up and we'll have a look at the engine. All right, so now we've got the vehicle jacked up, we can then open it. So let's open up the bonnet and let's have a bit of a look. All right, so here we got the heart of the engine. So we need to work out what is going on. So let's have a bit of a closer look. Right, so first thing we are going to do is just use a set of guard covers. Now, although we're only working on one side of the vehicle, it is advised to always use two. That way you can ensure that even if you do have to go to one side of the car or the other, or you're just checking something from a different side that you've been working on, you're not going to scratch it whatsoever. Also, being a customer's car, I don't particularly want to scratch this thing. It has been freshly repainted as well. All right, so the ones I'm using are just Mighty Car Mods magnetic guard covers. If you haven't already, check them out on their website. They are really good and they do ship anywhere in the world and are a local Australian company. All right, so what we need to do is work out where this noise is coming from. So we know it is engine related and it is brake related. So we got the engine and we got the brake booster assembly here. So what connects the two together? Well, we have this vacuum hose just here. I believe it to be anyway. No, that looks to be just a PCV that goes to atmosphere. So that is completely illegal. We might need to rectify that as well. So scrap that. Now, we have this vacuum hose here that goes from the manifold all the way down to the brake booster itself. So we want to visually inspect that to make sure that the pipe isn't leaking. All right, so I've already got a torch on this, but I'm just gonna have a look anyway. So you pretty much wanna look at the pipe and see if there's any hoses that are split. It is rubber, so it is going to get hot and cold being in an engine bay, but also it can just deteriorate over time. So it doesn't appear to be any splits at all. If you're really unsure of how to diagnose this, you can get a little bit of brake and carby cleaner, or even just a bit of WD-40 or silicone, anything that's pretty much flammable in an aerosol can other than deodorant and, you know, being an idiot. What you want to do there is spray it around any sort of fittings or hoses that you believe it to be coming from whilst the engine is running. Now what this will do is, if it is creating a vacuum leak, so it is running too lean, it is getting too much oxygen and not enough fuel, when you spray some carby cleaner around there and the pipes, the fittings, gaskets, whatever it may be, what it will do is it will suck that into the particular part in which it's leaking. It will then go through the engine and then bring the acceleration of the revs up. So it will start to go quite low and stutter a little bit, and then it will come straight back up and you'll think, hang on, we've got a vacuum leak here. You spray it somewhere else, nothing changes. You spray it back in that one place and you find that it's actually leaking from that hose. So that is a really good diagnosis tip. So I've inspected all these and I know that they're all fine. All right, so what we're gonna do next is we're going to remove this vacuum pipe here. So I'm only going to disconnect it from the brake booster itself. Alrighty, so just grab a flat blade screwdriver and just undo the clamp. All right, and then that pipe will just pull straight off. Now try not to lose that hose clamp. Thank goodness that is just remaining in one spot. So we only need to remove it from the brake booster side. We don't need to remove it from the engine side at all. So just have a visual inspection on the pipe as well and just see what sort of condition it's in. If you squeeze and it feels like it's crumbling in your fingers, chances are it probably needs to be replaced. Now that's just a standard coolant hose as well. So it's only supplying a vacuum. It's not actually putting any pressure through the system. So it doesn't have to be super high rated, but it'll do for the job. So next thing we need to do is also have a look around here, see if we can see any cracks. There is another vacuum hose down around here, I believe. Yep, so there's a little rubber hose just down the bottom. I'll grab the camera and just show you. Okay, so just down here, there is a little elbow piece here. That's just a rubber hose. So we just need to inspect that when we get it out, but I'm fairly confident that's not going to be the problem. To get the booster out, it is quite simple. All we need to do is release this nut here on this flange. So that's just the main feed line to the brake booster. Also, the brake fluid level is quite low here. We need to top it up anyway, so we'll make sure that we re-bleed it when we're done. Also, that pipe is a bit kinked there as well, so might see if we can get a new pipe and just re-bend it into shapes. That way it's a proper shape rather than looking like it's kinked. So we may have to take that pipe off completely, but we'll see how we go. Also, we need to disconnect this hose here. So this one goes to the T-piece that runs down here and splits to the front and rear of the vehicle. Alrighty, so there are also a couple of 5/16 nuts and bolts just here. So it looks like it's pretty simple to get off. We'll probably just undo this one here, I reckon. And then the same down here, so that one there and the one down the bottom, then that whole assembly will just pull off and we can inspect the brake booster there. So let's pull everything out and let's have a look. Alright, so I think I was completely wrong with the size of the bolts that, yeah, well, so they're actually 1/2 inch, they're not 5/16 like I thought. So you're probably also wondering, how is it that I know that this is going to be the problem? Well, years of experience tells me, but also some real simple diagnosis. So you want to always make sure that before you go and diagnose anything or pull it apart, that you are confident that that's what the problem is going to be. The last thing you want to do is just throw a dart and hope it's that, and then you rebuild it and put it back together and it still does it. So this is sort of a process of elimination. A really good process step here, which we probably missed before, is that a really good way to know is if it is the booster, is disconnect the vacuum pipe here and then run the car. What you're going to need to do is block that pipe off, otherwise that's going to create an even bigger vacuum leak and cause the car to run quite rough. Once that's blocked off, you then want to be applying the brake pressure. So put your foot on the brake pedal and see what happens. If no noise comes out, chances are that this is what the problem is. The reason why that is because this has been eliminated. So there's no vacuum assistance to the booster whatsoever, which then means this is what we've removed and it is now working fine. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I've just grabbed a rag. I'm just going to lay it out like that. That way I can sit my tools on there, but also not damage the customer's car. Now, even though it is a mate's car, it doesn't mean that I treat it any differently to any customer or even my own car. Try not to drop the nut when you pull it off, which I just did. All right, pull the bolt out of there. All right, it's one down, 2 to go. 2 nuts we've just taken off. Just have to work out how this bolt comes out, I'd say. There we go, just give it a bit of a persuasion and she'll come out. Then we got the 3rd nut and bolt just down the bottom here. Now, before we go any further, we need to crack the lines for the brake pipe. So what we need to do is ensure that we catch as much of the brake fluid as possible. Otherwise, we're going to destroy this customer's paint. So really good tip here is to grab a container. That way, when we put it underneath any of the fittings, if it's going to drip directly into there. If not, grab yourself a couple of rags and just smother them absolutely everywhere. That way you can ensure that you catch all of the brake fluid that drips. Moving forward, Tomo's tech tip is if you are ever doing this job and you are unsure if you're going to be able to undo the nut or not, get yourself a set of pipe spanners. Really good investment to have. You will use them every now and again, but when you do, it will be a godsend. All right, so that pipe is now loose. And remember, because of gravity, hopefully it should, being the operative word, keep all the fluid inside the cylinder here. So let's grab another spanner, then we can loosen that pipe off that goes from the cylinder down to the T-piece. So as well, when you finish this job, you need to ensure that you bleed all of the brakes as well. So you can't just bleed one because you've just opened that circuit. You need to ensure that you bleed all of them. Otherwise, you're going to have a really spongy pedal and it's not going to rectify the problem, or worst case, it's going to make it even worse. Now, ensure that if you drip any brake fluid on the vehicle, that you wash it off immediately with water. Alrighty, let's have a look at this. Just a 10mm socket. So we're just going to undo that Real easy, because you'll probably find this to have a bit of tension on it. The spring inside here outwards. So we just need to ensure that as we take it off, we do it real easy, otherwise the whole thing's just going to go kablamo and spin apart. Alright, so I'm just going to hold that bolt, stop it spinning. That'll enable us to take it all out. Take the bolt out completely. Take it out from that V-band clamp. Just going to keep that together. Pull that to the side. It's going to be the fun part. Just separating that V-band clamp. Ah, there we go. Popped it off. Okay, so we have the two halves. Now what I'm expecting to see in here, this is the diaphragm. I'm expecting to see a broken seal somewhere. So I wouldn't imagine brake fluid to be on both sides of this seal. Should only be on, well, it shouldn't be anywhere, really. An internal leak inside the master cylinder itself, or even just this valve. The valve is released. Well, the relief valve inside here maybe has let go. But that all seems pretty good. Like there's no tears anywhere that I can see. It does have some clean bits on the outsides, but hasn't got any visible issues with it. So that seal is also sealing around the outside of this as well. It's also important to make sure that you note which way that this came off, because it will only go back on one way, and if you get it around the wrong way, then chances are it's not going to work. So this edge all the way around here, that's what's going to be sealing it. So everything seems to be nice and fine there. There's no damage to any of these surfaces here whatsoever, so that is a good sign. Next thing that we're going to be checking is this valve just here. So we are missing a screw. That could even be the issue. So there is a recessed screw in here. So let's take that out and let's have a look and see what's going on here. Maybe is that where it's leaking from? So we should be able to get more of those screws. I'll just go down to the local bolt shop and see if I can get one. If I can't find one online to suit this exact application. Real easy, take that off. See you later. Okay. So that spring, I would imagine, is supposed to sit inside there. Once again, there's no real sign either of any damage to this seal. So that is a good sign, but where is the problem? Where and why is this happening? So you also want to be looking not just for any sort of marks and deterioration or anything, but also any sort of normalities. So let's just have a look at this seal. So you can see the bottom here is round, but then the top kind of ovals out a little bit. So I think this could be the issue right here. All right, so I've just refitted 2 screws inside here just to retest the vacuum and pressure of here, and it seems to be okay. So I'm fairly convinced that the seal here has been lifting on one side because there hasn't been a screw in there. So we do need to get another screw, but also we need to pull the whole thing apart to be able to rebuild it and get a seal kit for it. So what we're going to do now is flip it over. Now I've literally just pulled the boot off from the inside here. So that little recessed bit sits over the top of here, and then that comes off. So we probably need to compress that a little bit to be able to get that bolt out of there. Now it does have a giant spring inside there, so we have to make sure that that is lined up when you put it back together. But also there probably shouldn't be brake fluid on the inside here. So it tells me that the seal is probably leaking internally and does need to be rebuilt. So it's probably a combination of losing a bit of brake fluid inside here, because it is quite wet. As you can see, there shouldn't be brake fluid there. That should be completely dry, because that is a completely sealed system. So we need to work on getting this bolt out and then taking all the other bolts off here as well. All right, so all I did there was just loosen off that nut. That was pretty much finger tight. Once put a bit of pressure on it, take off the plate, take off the giant spring. The spring might only go one way, which it does. So it does have the bigger end, which is facing outwards, and the smaller end, which is facing inwards. Pull everything apart. So that's just the piston for that as well. So yeah, you can see all down in there, it is completely wet. So we do need to take off all these bolts. Let's just make sure they're not finger tight, which they're not. Terrific. All right, we'll take off all those, then we can pull it apart and get the measurement. Then we can order some new parts for it. So we do need to get a some circlip pliers and remove that circlip that's just inside there. This works. Oh, what do you know? Perfect. Right, so I'm going to use this as a bit of a slide hammer. Hopefully this will work. Try to get this off. Yeah, cool. All right, sweet. Pulled it all apart. Now, so we have a O-ring around here, which is quite wet. So it tells me that the master cylinder seal is leaking internally. So it's leaking internally inside the booster itself. And then we have this little guide here. That's what it is. And then the seal as well. So there's another seal we need to replace as well as this O-ring. So now what we need to do is measure the inside. So probably the OD of this, that'll tell us what the ID of that is. All right, so I just quickly measured it up. I just have to work out what the imperial measurement is of this. We should be able to get a rebuild kit for it. So let's touch base in a couple of days once I have the rebuild kit available. All right, so it has been a couple of days since we last worked on this. I spoke to the customer and we gave him the option of either doing a rebuild of the brake booster or to buy a new one, and he decided to go ahead and buy a brand new one. And this is a really good option. It does have 12 months warranty and it is a direct replacement, so it just means less work for us, but we still need to make it all work. So what I'm hoping is all of the brackets and stuff are exactly the same as the old ones and we can just transfer them over or use the new ones out of the kit. So that'll just pretty much bolt directly straight on there. Then we just need to re-bleed the system as well. Now with the old pipe that ran from the brake master cylinder to the brake booster, I did inspect it and find that the pipe was actually in good working order. So here's Tomo's tech tip. When you're inspecting a pipe like this, always ensure that it is able to move round and around in circles on both ends. If it is kinked and is unable to move and it doesn't have any movement there, then you need to replace it or at least rebend it into another shape. What will happen here is it has a male end on this side and a female end on the opposite side. These are the two mating surfaces. So if that doesn't tighten up properly, then it is not going to seal properly and give you a leak. So always ensure that your brake pipes are in good working order. If they don't look any good, it is cheap enough to replace them. All right, so we're just going to reuse the old bracket. The new one does come with this exact thing, but someone has bent it and shaped it to the exact shape that we need to be able to fit it. So that is just fitted on these two nuts here. So they just unwind and then we can grab the bracket and slide it straight on, tighten them up and then refit the booster. All right, so we've got the bracket mounted. We're then going to go reinstall the booster. Then we can install the pipes and then carry out the brake fluid flush. Alright, so now the booster is fitted, we can then go and refit the brake lines. Just do them one at a time. Make sure as well that they start by hand first before you start using a spanner on there, otherwise you run the risk that it's not going to tighten up properly, and then it cross threads, and then you're just going to create more drama for yourself. Make sure as well you don't tighten them up too much, otherwise you're going to crush the fittings. Alright, so next one is going to be the pipe from the booster to the master cylinder. So we're just going to have to wiggle this one a little bit, just make sure it lines up properly on both ends. And just be careful, they shouldn't be two different sizes, but sometimes you get two different size threads on either component, so it's always good to So double check that first. So there's actually two different size nuts on these pipes. So this one has a 7/16 nut on either end, whereas this one that goes from the booster to the T-junction, it is a 10mm spanner that you need, or 3/8 depending where you are in the world. Alright, once the brake lines are tight, you can then refit your vacuum hose. We're just going to leave that clamp off just for a minute, just so we can get it operational, and then we can put the clamp back on the pipe. Now, it does have a bleed nipple just here on the top of the brake booster, which means you can bleed it here as well as all the other nipples. So if you haven't already, make sure you check out the video in which I did on how to bleed brakes, which should be up over here. All right, so I've just had another quick costume change. It is another day we've spent on this thing. So what we got caught up with last night was getting this pipe in there. So the pipe that runs from the brake booster just here all the way down to the T-piece, the original pipe was no longer any good because the fittings at the end weren't going in properly and it wasn't sealing. It was squirting brake fluid all over here, so we cleaned all that down with some water. I then pumped the brake fluid all the way through the system, left it off this T-piece here until it was a consistent drip. I then tightened it and then re-bled it from here. So I think we're pretty safe to say that the brake fluid system is completely bled now. So I'm going to go through anyway and just double check to make sure that there's no air left in the system whatsoever. We've got a really firm pedal. Now in saying that, the pedal is quite firm when the vehicle is off, so that's a good thing. Now the real moment of truth is to see if it makes that same honking noise we heard before. So let's switch the car on and hope that we fix the problem. Perfect, no noise whatsoever. Alright, so that's essentially it. We've fixed the issue, which was the honking sound to start off with. We worked out what it was, which was an internal fault in the brake booster. We've put a new brake booster in there. We've confirmed that running the vehicle has rectified the problem, so we've pretty much fixed it. Well, we have fixed it, I guess. I just need to go around and just bleed each one of the nipples just to ensure that it is properly bled and there's no air left in the system. There was also some new pipe that I'm going to replace to the brake booster, because this one is pretty crappy, so I'm just going to replace that. Don't really need to show you how to do it. But guys, if you like the episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave any comments in the section below for things that you want to see me do in the future, or even hints and tips to do with this particular job. So, like always guys, stay COVID safe, and see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.